in the end, it's probably going to be worth it. And one thing that I believe the mentor figure represents is, although it is your journey, you probably like it's always there's some other factors that there are involved in stories. There are going to be people rooting for you to fail, and there are going to be people rooting for you to succeed. And that is something that I think it's very interesting. In the end of the day, uh, people are want to see a story that they can relate to. I mean, no wonder why that last Spider-Man movie was a huge success. Like, it shows Spider-Man dealing with difficulties that are human. Like, he has the issue of having to save the world, of taking responsibility to being the new Iron Man, but he also has the difficulty of being afraid to talk to his crush that he likes her. And that's something that I think it's very that is a very interesting way of storytelling.
Well, and I think that's, a lot of stories, that's why it reflects humanity, because stories for us are kind of like emotional rehearsal.
Mm-hmm.
We may not, the movie we're watching or the story we're reading, we may not want to accomplish the same physical accomplishment or get the same physical object that the main character does.
Mm-hmm.
But our emotional hero's journey might be super similar. And so it's that internal, external action that's taking place that, it's the internal sometimes that we can relate to more than the external. And that's, to me, that's what metaphor is. It's, what we're seeing on screen is a metaphor for our own internal hero's journey.
And one thing that I've noticed a lot is that, like, nowadays, stories that get out of the same pattern tend to stand out. One series that I watched recently that it really intrigued me was called Cobra Kai, and it's the story of Karate Kid, but 30 years later. However, it is focused on the villain's point of view, and that is something that I think it's very interesting because it shows how human people. The story starts showing how Daniel LaRusso, who was the protagonist of the original Karate Kid, how successful he has become. It also it gives contrast to how Johnny Lawrence, who was the bully, how he turned out to be. And however, throughout the story, we start to sympathize more with Johnny, and we start to kind of question Daniel's actions, since now Johnny is in year under, and he's the one who has to overcome the most challenges.
Yeah, point of view changes everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody in the original Karate Kid was living their own hero's journey.
Yeah.
And so you change the point of view and you see from someone else's perspective, and you see that everybody has a sorrow, everybody has something to overcome, everybody has a threshold to cross. Everybody has their moments of victory, but everybody also has their own enemies. And honestly, that's encouraging to me in real life, because if you take one moment from someone's life, let's imagine someone who's failed the last year of school. Mm-hmm. You take one moment from their life, that doesn't define their whole story. It doesn't define who they are, and it doesn't define their whole story. They're still on their journey. That's my whole teaching philosophy in a nutshell, Pablo.
And also the thing about point of view that you mentioned that I think is very interesting is that, for instance, Cobra Kai, the way that it shows the point of view of the guy who you were taught to hate, and you show how he turned out to be a bully and everything that he has been through. And you start to, and that is another factor that makes you sympathize with him. You know his story. I don't know where I heard this, but there's a quote that says, "It's hard to hate a person whose story you know." Oh.
Yeah. I just pointed to a poster up on my wall, right?
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah,
It's true.
it's
I
very.
love that quote. I don't know if you heard that quote because I have that poster on my wall, but like, I love that
Maybe
story.
I have.
Yeah.
But anyways, it's something that, it's something that, like, knowing somebody, it can, like, it can make you say, either hate them or, like, depending on what you're shown about that person, or it can make you understand the person's moral values.
Again, I think that's a little bit of what story is. When you it's emotional rehearsal is when we read a story and we see ourselves in that story. Emotional. That's our capacity for empathy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, and so that's to me that quote of it's hard to hate somebody whose story you know. I think we're made for empathy. We're made to see things from other points of view. That doesn't mean that we excuse terrible behavior.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you know someone else's story and they're behaving terribly, it's you don't just dismiss them. You don't hate them. You want to help them. You want to help them see things more clearly. And so, yeah, I think that's definitely a part of it.
Yeah, I think that's what makes storytelling something so great, because it changes, like, it's entertainment, sure, but it's also something that is completely possible to change a person's view on the world itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, a good example of that is a show that I finished watching recently, which is Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
Which is like, it's the story is in the point of view of the bad guy from throughout the entire story, but like you still sympathize with him because he has to provide for his family and he has cancer. That's something that I think is very interesting about storytelling, and specifically about the hero's journey, is that although people are not necessarily facing the Joker or having to destroy the Death Star, but they also have challenges that they have to overcome, and the fears that they have to overcome, whether it is love, whether it is taking the risk of embarrassing yourself on a school play, whether it's finishing personal project, which is a huge pain.
Or sickness, or all those things. Like it's all the things we face as humans, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's true. I love Breaking Bad as an example because, especially also because we're all broken in some way. We're broken by our circumstances. We're broken by our insecurities. So it truly is comparable. Like whether it's destroying the Death Star, or whether it's destroying the cancer cells that are or leaving enough money from your family before you die, or and I also think that that's so cool because the main character in that he's so layered, he's so complicated, and I think we are often much more complicated than we give each other credit for. No one is purely good or purely bad. We all have these underlying motivations that one of my AP seminar students always talks about how we can't we do good things, but really we're doing good things for others because we want happiness for ourselves. Like it's our own personal motivation. Like we want to feel good about ourselves. Our motivations. We may want to see good for others. We may want to see good in their life, but we also sort of want to feel good about ourselves. Yeah. And so you can't separate out those motivations. We're all complicated, and I think that's good. What's good about the hero's journey, because I think when we think of the word hero, we think at a surface level, we think perfection. Oh, hero, they're perfect. They have all the strength and the power, and they can do anything they want to. But really, the true hero is broken in a lot of ways. They're imperfect, and they have to overcome. They don't necessarily even overcome their imperfections. They just achieve with those same imperfections as part of them. And I think that's important to remember as humans.